All right, everybody. Sorry for the brief technical difficulties. As soon as we started the live stream, the software we used decided it was going to go kaput and wouldn't allow us to do anything. So we're back. I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario, and hold on to your butts, ladies and gentlemen, because we are still talking tropics today. We still have Rafael out there churning in the southeast Gulf of Mexico, making history, more or less. If you haven't taken a look at our News 6 website or the app, we have an article out there describing exactly how Rafael will be a lot more of a historic storm than we've seen in a little bit in terms of just what it's doing out there. It's not going to be impactful too much to the United States, but I'll give you a brief breakdown of that here momentarily. Thank you so much to those of you tuning in over on the News 6 website, or not the website, I'm sorry, the YouTube channel, as well as the Just Weather YouTube channel. So with that being said, let's get started with the latest National Hurricane Center outlook. So you can see here we have Rafael, a currently 100-mile-an-hour sustained hurricane in the immediate southeast Gulf of Mexico. As it continues to push off towards the west now, it's moving at about due west, give or take 10 to 12 miles an hour after making its way over Cuba. It is expected to dip to the south, and then when I show you the spaghetti plots for this system, it's very bizarre what happens with it. It just talk about inconsistency and low confidence. So I also want to turn your attention to that 2020 area there. If I put this into motion, if you notice, it is spinning. It's throwing some pretty good thunderstorm activity over Puerto Rico, the U.S. British Virgin Islands. And then don't look now, but where I have that red circle drawn at the very tail end of this animation, that is also where we are potentially watching the next tropical area of low pressure to maybe try to manifest itself as we get into the middle portions of this month between the 12th and the 18th of November. So let's get on to the latest for Hurricane Rafael. There you have it. Central pressure is now at 971 millibars, moving west-northwest at approximately 9 miles an hour. Winds in the center of circulation are at 100 miles an hour, 100 even, and it has weakened a little bit since the earlier advisory issued at 7 o'clock. And if I roll the clock forward, you can see here that as this system tracks towards the west, it's going to run headfirst into lots of wind shear and even more so dense, dry air coming off of Louisiana, Texas, and portions of northern Mexico. And then you can see it's going to take such a very bizarre track. It's very bizarre to say this, but it's almost like reverse Milton. We had Milton form up in the Bay of Campeche, move almost due east for a while before curving back towards the northeast, and sad to say, impacting our viewing area here in Central Florida. This system is going against the grain for, historically speaking, November, and it's going west and eventually west-southwest into the Bay of Campeche, where Milton originally formed up earlier in the month of October. So, very bizarre turn of events out there, honestly. Don't really know what to make of it. We're definitely watching history in the making. Check out that web article. I have a screen cap graphic in there as well to show you exactly all the different named storms and where they've gone from 1850 to today's date, and they've all taken pretty differently of a track in comparison to what Rafael is doing currently. Moving on over, this is going to be your water vapor satellite. And you can see, despite this system looking fairly symmetrical, you can see some pretty good thunderstorms firing near the center. It looks like it might be trying to clear out a center again, an eye. Now, that being said, if you look out ahead of it, I love this water vapor overlay because if you look, we have lots of that dense yellow and especially the oranges just out ahead of this feature. And that's what's going to help to really start to bring this feature down alongside the wind shear out to the west of where this thing is. If you look up over northern Mexico and southern Texas, you can see those wispy blue streaks of moisture and cloud cover ripping out of the southwest, moving northeast. That's where your wind shear in the mid to highest points in the atmosphere are going to be in effect, and that's what's also going to start to tear apart the convective structure of Rafael. I wanted to bring you in for this as well. You could see so close, but so far, as the old saying goes. This is Rafael on the Mosaic Radar. It's still close enough to be seen by the Key West and the Tampa Bay radar sites, but thankfully, it's not going to be doing anything in terms of disturbing our weather in Central Florida. It is no longer in a position to do so, and you can very clearly see it is tracking off towards the west. We're actually losing the center. It's no longer really in that radar image right now. We're starting starting to only see the west side. Pretty decent feeder band working through parts of the Keys, Key West having done battle with severe weather yesterday. Likely the same song and dance today, but this is only going to continue to get better as the system pushes further and further. It's almost like it's retrograding, even though this is your traditional westward track that you would see during June, July, August, not in the month of November. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. If you look at these spaghetti plots, I wish I had something a bit more confident to tell you all, but I have never seen quite the conundrum like this. This is very, very interesting. And in fact, it almost looks like, minus the couple of members furthest to the left, the OFCL, the TVCE, just to name a couple of them. I don't really need you to know or recognize the acronyms for the computer models, but just about every single member here does something crazy. You can see one doing a loop-de-loop and then going back towards the southwest. You see that TVCN, the dark maroon one, goes west, pivots hard left, and then pivots left again, almost like it's doing an about face multiple times, and then starts headed back towards the east. And then we still have our couple of spaghetti plots, one swinging it back towards Central Florida. Don't panic. If it were to come back our way for whatever reason, that wind shear and the dry air is going to make this no more than just what would look like a naked swirl. To put it in, in layman's terms, it'll have no thunderstorm activity. It'll be fairly weak. It'll still be an area of low pressure, but it'll do pretty much nil to none in terms of our weather here in Central Florida. So I wanted to show you that. Very weird, honestly. This is probably the most bizarre storm we've had all hurricane season, even though I know we've had some anomalies prior to. This is going to be a look at our tropical moisture, so I'm sure a lot of you here in Central Florida have stepped outside over the last 48 hours and noticed just how soupy, muggy, rainy, how summer-like it feels out there, even though now we are much deeper into fall. And in fact, we're probably getting closer to the month-away threshold from bona fide seasonal winter. And if you look right now, what's happening is we have a stationary boundary that's gotten hung up over the Appalachians, the Ohio, Mississippi valleys, and it's draped through Louisiana into the Gulf of Mexico. That's what's also helping to increase our wind shear a little bit. Then we have all that tropical moisture not only associated with Rafael, but if you look to the far east portion of the chart, you see that blue high-pressure ridge spinning over Bermuda. So not only is Rafael helping to add a little bit more of that tropical moisture from the Caribbean, but we also have the influence of the southern base of our Bermuda high pressure dragging all that warm equatorial air from the hot waters that are still down there and all the leftover moisture from the MJO that is still passing overhead. It's bringing all that into the southeast and the mid-Atlantic, which is really helping to ramp up not only just our overall moisture and temperatures, but the heat index. Yesterday, we set a record up in Sanford. I believe it was 87 degrees in terms of actual recorded observed temperature. The heat indexes, regardless, are low to mid 90s. So it definitely feels a lot more like summer than it does out there in terms of November. This is a wonderful graphic that meteorologist Michelle Morgan, fantastic graphical composer is what I'll call her. She drew this up for me yesterday, and I love it. And this is exactly what's going to help break down why it is that Rafael has taken such a bizarre track. And I'll go ahead and stop the loop, as a matter of fact, so I can draw a little bit here. So if you look, oh, there I go, dorking that up again. There we go. All right, let's bring it back. So if you look at where the high pressure is, as I'd mentioned in terms of looking at the moisture flow, the winds around our high are rotating clockwise. So on the south and southwest quadrant, I'm looking right in through here, I'm going to draw an upside down right triangle. In this quadrant here, we have easterlies coming across our system. And now pressure is one influence on tropical cyclones, but in reality, they're just following the winds in the tropics. So as a result, with this high pressure spinning over the southeast and the western, southwestern Atlantic, that's what's going to keep giving Rafael a nudge away from our viewing area, which I know we're all very excited about. On top of that, what I also want to draw your attention to is the jet stream running across our viewing area and over the southern United States. And if you notice, it creates a ridge in the upper levels. So not only do we have this high pressure ridge bullying Rafael to the west, but we also, if you want to use your imagination, I'll try to draw it in here as well. In the upper levels above where we stand at the surface, we have another large anticyclone parked, driving our warm and humid conditions over the southeast up the eastern seaboard. That's also what is over top, just kind of smothering Rafael and shoving him off towards the west. So that's what's going to keep us protected. This is a very erroneous pattern. You don't typically see this during November. In fact, usually, if you go check out that article, you'll see every single storm that we've had in the month of November through recorded history has hit the Sunshine State of Florida in one way, shape, or form. Coming up after the break here momentarily, we're going to take a quick 2 minutes to catch ourselves up, kind of go over what we've already gone through. We're going to look forward in time just a little bit for the rest of November and talk what else may be out there on top of our first AOY and down in the Caribbean. And then I'll make sure to make some room for a quick question and answer session before we fully wrap up for the afternoon. Don't go anywhere, folks. We will be right back. And we're back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for sticking around after our 2-minute break. As promised, we're going to go ahead and look ahead. And I know that sounds so weird of me to say. You'd think that we were still in August, September, or even the early periphery of October. No, it is November 7th. Election Day has come and gone, and we are still looking across mainly the Caribbean. Thankfully, we're not seeing much out in the Atlantic, although what could be sneaking its way into the Caribbean over the next few days actually did originate as a Cabo Verde African easterly wave, a tropical wave that is currently moving its way through the Atlantic right now. So here is my favorite chart, the tropical probabilities. Now, this is going to be older data. This is from overnight yesterday, so it is a little lackluster. It's kind of behind in comparison to what all the current data we have out right now, but it'll still get the job done. As you play it forward in time, you can see that Rafael moves off towards the west and southwest, and then there you have it. Down there in the Caribbean, we are left with that sort of light shade of blue, little speck of green down there, and that's precisely where it is we're going to be watching. I'll back up the clock just a little bit so you guys can see that our first feature, moving through the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas, really quickly loses confidence, at least in terms of our Euro probabilities. That starts to diminish pretty quickly as it interacts with Cuba. And then a little further out in time, you see we're left with a pretty decent but marginal spot down there in the Caribbean as we go through next week and approach the following weekend. Just to put that into perspective, that's how far out we're looking right now. We're doing it intentionally because we're not expecting pop-off activity between now and then. We are really going to start to rein ourselves in. I know it seems busy out there, but we have time to hopefully catch ourselves after Rafael is done, and we'll be kind of back to what we were doing early in the hurricane season, going storm by storm, as opposed to this is here, that's there, that's over there, this is looping, and this is rocking, and so on and so forth. So moving over to the next chart, I wanted to update you all on this. This is our Global Tropics Hazard Outlook brought to us by Climate Prediction Center, and you can see through the dates of 13 November to the 19th of November, we're still at a somewhat elevated risk for tropical activity. Now, you know, this is more or less just going off of climatology. Doesn't mean that we're actually going to get anything, but there are models out there suggesting we'll still want to watch the Caribbean, the Southern Caribbean, which has been a favorable spot all hurricane season in reality, for the potential for more activity down the road. I'll go ahead and fast forward to November 20th and the 26th, and again, even as we're approaching the Thanksgiving holiday and Black Friday, Climate Prediction Center does suggest that there are the ingredients available at all levels of the atmosphere in the large scale to try to produce something in the realm of a tropical disturbance, let alone one more named storm. The next storm on the list now would be Sarah, since it looks like that AOI that is given a 20% shot is probably not going to do much over the next 7 days, and models are only slowly but surely getting a little less and less infatuated with it. So I'll leave you with this. We're watching the Caribbean, and I promise I'm not recycling this. I mean, I have. I'm not going to lie to you. I've used this slide on numerous occasions already, but the fact still stands. We are indeed watching the Caribbean, and the new date and time are going to be from November 12th through to the 18th. Now, on a brighter note, I will say this. For us here in Florida anyways, if I were to show you where it is our models are generally spinning this system up, it'd be somewhere down here. We get a little low pressure rocking down there in the Southern Caribbean. We have a large dome of high pressure that creates our United States force field over the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan, and the eastern seaboard. So if we did get a questionable tropical cyclone a la Sarah down there, it is more than likely going to ricochet up towards the north and east. And I know a lot of you are probably saying that's exactly what we thought Rafael was going to do, but climatology has to kick in at some point, at least I would think. I would hate to imagine that 2024 is only going to continue to throw curveballs at us all the way up until we can finally say that the hurricane season is said and done. There are a couple of sources out there that, you know, I'm a little hazy with. I wouldn't recommend, but they're saying tropical systems into December. Now, there is nothing to suggest that, nothing at all. We're not seeing anything. There's a couple of passes of those Kelvin waves that I've briefed you on before. The MJO may try to cycle back around after its trip around the globe, but we'll wait and see, one storm at a time, and I know it's the holiday season, so the last thing we want to do is continue to talk hurricanes as we're ironing out our Thanksgiving and especially our Christmas travel and vacation plans. So as you all can see, we've gone full screen. We're going to go ahead and open it up to some questions. If you have any in the chat, it doesn't look like we have anybody commenting on News 6. It may have been the technical difficulties earlier that we lost our viewers over there. But if you do have any questions, feel free to blast them in the chat. We'll give it about maybe another 5 minutes or so to answer anything that may be going on over there. Let's see. So we have somebody on the Gist Weather page. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the username, but they ask, is the Gulf of Mexico in a new hurricane-producing trend or just bad luck? Atlantic Ocean seems rarer than Gulf hurricane, or Atlantic Ocean proper seems rarer than Gulf hurricanes lately. So fantastic question. We kind of discussed this earlier in the hurricane season during the months of August and September. We were very quiet out there. We had Francine, we had Ernesto, and then we also had, who else was there? We had Debbie. That was a dry wave through 75% of its life cycle until it finally started to organize to the south of Cuba, and then we all know where that story ended. So it's not necessarily that the Gulf of Mexico was more primed, it was just a little bit more favorable. We talked about how the scattered water temps, all the hot water everywhere, was disturbing the large scale weather pattern in terms of our long wave features, the large troughs and ridges that I've shown you all in the satellite before, as well as where our dry air was propagating. So luck would have it, the Atlantic just wasn't quite doing it this hurricane season. All the conditions were there, the searing hot water, the piping hot water. The Saharan dust came and went every now and again, and we had some decent MJO pushes. But because of the wave breaking, the large waves in the upper levels of the atmosphere literally crashing down into the MDR, bringing with it sinking dry air, dusty air off of Africa, it just wasn't doing it. That's why the Caribbean and the Gulf seem to be the only ones really producing this hurricane season, because they were more ripe and they didn't have to deal with as much subsidence and dry air. History is Fashion over on Just Weather asks, will the Southeast see less severe weather this year? More than likely. Now, I will caveat that and say that our climate models are thinking La Nina will only be here temporarily, and we will slowly retrograde back into a neutral pattern. Coming up, once we can finally say hurricane season is fully, I'm talking tied into a nice bundle and field goal kick, just punted as far away as we can possibly get from it, we'll talk a little bit about what spring and next hurricane season may look like, just a faint whisper of what it may look like. Genesis over on News 6 says, David, please keep watching the Caribbean for us. Thank you so much, Genesis. You can definitely count that we will always be watching the Caribbean, always. We always got to watch the Caribbean, even outside of the hurricane season, because we do get those very strong frontal systems that'll go down there and try to wreak a little bit of havoc with the winds coming off of the United States and out of the Gulf of Mexico, churning up some thunderstorm activity and some very heavy rainfall for the islanders down there. They are our neighbors after all, so we got to take care of everybody, especially over on the Just Weather page, Jonathan and I. Melissa Riley over on Just Weather. Is there another hurricane coming? Not right now. No, there is the potential for something to develop in the Caribbean. We're looking at it. There are indications that the atmosphere will still be ready to rock and roll to produce another named storm. But in terms of landfalling in the United States, we're getting even lower and lower in terms of confidence, just because, again, climatology has to kick in. Right now, we're in a very weird upper level pattern with a huge dominant ridge over the east, driving all this stuff towards the west. It's keeping Rafael sandwiched. So as you can see, even under an anomalous pattern, it's going to keep everything suppressed and blanketed and pushed down to our south, hoping to keep everything away from us. And then once we fix the pattern and we get more of the troughing over the east coast, that's going to help to eject systems all the way up and out into the Atlantic, or just squash them all together. A305 Aaron Aaron over on Just Weather. Seems like the East Coast is safe from this hurricane season from Virginia and northward. Does that mean the winter will be bad? Not necessarily will be bad. It'll just definitely be a bit more of a textbook winter time because of the fact that we're looking at more of a La Nina pattern with the jet more to the north. So instead of seeing all the systems during our El Nino winter last season coming through the south, those Texas lows ripping across the Gulf Coast, producing severe weather for the plains, the Dixie Alley area, and us here in the southeast, we're going to see that traveling more towards the north, and that's where a lot of your abundant cool weather and wet conditions will be with all the storm systems. Down here, it should be a little more mild, but that doesn't mean we're not going to see any cool weather bouts at all. But alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, everybody, for being such a spectacular audience. You were always fantastic. It's great getting to talk to you on the daily. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday Eve. You can catch us here at the helm once again. We got started a little late today because of President Joe Biden's speech, but tomorrow we should be back in business for an 11:30 start time. I look forward to seeing everybody then. And until then, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.